So, dear audience, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed lunch and your first inspirational journey outside. And of course, the sun. It wasn't easy to get you in, like always, but we have a good afternoon. We're going to have a nice time right now. I reassure you. Everything this afternoon revolves around the topic reforestation, regeneration, and deer management in the future. The following panel lecture should give a broad overview of the biggest questions in reforestation, which are what are the biggest threats to successful reforestation? How big is the role of deer damage now, and how will it be in the future? Or how are deer populations changing, and how do we monitor them? It's a problem. Is reforestation without protection economically feasible without with the current deer population, or what is the role of hunting versus protection methods? Yeah, a bunch of questions we have for the senior policy officer at FACE from the European Federation for Hunting and Conservation. Ladies and gentlemen, please extend a warm welcome to Sabrina Dietz.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, also from my side, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I'm now very happy to talk more about and discuss more about reforestation, forest regeneration, deer management, and also the important roles hunters have to achieve an appropriate and healthy balance. I would like to start my presentation with quickly introducing what FACE is and who we are. So FACE is the European Federation for Hunting and Conservation. We are based in Brussels and have members from 37 countries, which are mainly the national hunting associations from the EU 27 member states, but also from other non-EU countries. And we basically represent the interests and values of hunters and hunting in front of the EU institutions and in different stakeholder platforms. And our day-to-day work evolves around policies, regulations, or guidelines that would then have an impact on hunting and nature conservation. And you might ask yourself why FACE is so important. Well, in the end, 80% of all regulations that impact nature conservation and hunting are coming from Brussels. So FACE work is very important for rural stakeholders on the ground. Yes, we have seen that already quite a bit. So the most interesting policy at the moment for FACE is the EU forestry strategy when it comes to ungulate management, and I won't go into detail because we have already heard a lot about different policies impacting forestry. But for FACE, the most important question was, how are these policies impacting ungulate management in Europe? And interestingly enough, in the EU forestry strategy, our wildlife management is only mentioned once and in a very short sentence. But ungulate management is picked up in the guidelines. The Closer to Nature Forestry Guideline, the Primary and Old-Growth Forest Working Document, and the Forest Urban Agroforestry Guidelines. And these guidelines are at the moment prepared by the European Commission together with member states and relevant stakeholders to help member states implementing the EU forestry strategy. And for us as FACE, when ungulate management is touched, we only want a really light framework, because I think you and me, we can agree that actions and solutions concerning forestry and ungulate management are best found at national level or even regional or local level. But why is ungulate management so important? And as you might see on the map, these white spots here in Europe, these are the only areas where you cannot find any deer species, and these are mainly the really high altitude areas of Europe or some coastal areas or islands. But all over Europe you can find one or at least one or also several deer species, with roe deer, of course, dominating, and wild boars and ungulate, and moose, especially in the northern areas of Europe. And if we quickly look into the past, so within the last 50 to 60 years, we could see an incredible recovery of Europe's large mammals and also of our deer species. And with the red deer displaying a population increase of 400%. So how will this look in the future? And I think we can see that this increase will most likely not stop, especially in the southern parts in Europe and in Fenno-Scandinavia, there's room for more. And the causes for this increase of deer populations, they are very diverse, ranging from milder climates to more productive landscapes to rural abandonment and the lack of large predators in some areas of Europe. In a completely natural ecosystem, such kind of overabundance of a single species would only occur in a very short time, and then nature would start regulating itself. But if we nowadays talk about overabundance, this is a completely human-made judgment, and it occurs when the overabundant species is affecting human or human livelihoods, but if it's also affecting the fitness of its own species, but also having an impact on other species and thereby causing completely dysfunctional ecosystems. And these increased deer populations or the not appropriate management of these deer populations, you can also, of course, see that it has a huge impact on forest regeneration, and you know best on how much different levels the deer populations can impact forest regeneration, starting from the impact on a single tree, where you can when there's an increased browsing pressure, you have of course an increased death of seedlings. Reduction of growth, misshapen trees, and so on. And it goes further to influencing the forest herb community and also altering food web interactions up to whole modification of habitats where single deer species or populations can alter the vegetation structure and alter the nutrient cycle, where they choose on browsing on valuable tree species while completely leaving others. And this, of course, has also a huge economic impact. And these are only some numbers from the past, because it's really hard, in fact, to get an European overview, because this kind of numbers are very fragmented and hard to access. But if you only look at the numbers of Sweden, the moose browsing damage alone adds up to 50 million euros per year. When we focus now on ungulate damage and its causes, it's quite interesting, because science found out that there can be up to 80 distinct factors that can influence the feeding behavior of deers. And I've only listed some of the most important ones, which can start from the level of disturbance in the forest. So the more disturbance there is in the forest, the more stressful it is for the deer. They need more nutrition intake, which then in the end can lead up to increased browsing. But also the lack of alternative browsing or grazing opportunities, climate change, hunting regimes as well, as, and the broader landscape, so how productive is the broader landscape, can influence the damage caused by deer. But one important thing is also the level of dialogue. The level of dialogue between the hunting community and the forestry sector. Because in the field we see quite often, if there's a lack of dialogue, if there's a lack of cooperation, this leads to actions that are most often not beneficial for valuable forest ecosystems. So we have seen now a lot of that there can be a lot of different causes for the damage, and sometimes it is even not the level of the deer damage that is causing the level of the deer population that is causing the damage. But then we also need to find solutions, and solutions together with all relevant stakeholders. And these actions or solutions, they can be done at very different scales, starting from protecting the single tree with repellents or plastic covers, to looking at the broader regional landscapes while implementing adaptive harvest management programs, coordinating different hunting areas, but also having actions on the vegetation side, which is also very important. If we focus on hunting versus other protection measures, hunting is quite often, or in many situations, the best and readily available measure or tool to reduce the numbers of deers on a large scale, but also influencing in a bit more local manner by influencing density, demography, and distribution. And depending on the level of the damage or where it is located, you can use adaptable hunting forms such as interval hunting or hunting as focused areas to reduce the damage. And quite often it is still the best trade-off between economy, so the costs of the measure, and the efficiency. But, and this is one key message I really want to bring across, it is never hunting versus other protection measures, it is hunting with other protection measures. Because only if hunting is coordinated with measures on the forest ecosystem, on vegetation, we can create future fit and resilient forest ecosystems. So here you can see the phase recommendations, and you can see that they're really broad, but it is because also at EU level we advocate that actions and solutions should be found at local or regional level. But we strongly advocate that wildlife management, deer management is integrated into the forest management plans. Quite often adaptive harvest management plans are beneficial if they are coordinated together with the hunting community and the forest sector. And as I said before, sometimes the solution cannot be only found within the forest and that you need to look at the broader landscape, at the agricultural land around, and also take into consideration the social and ecological context. And there, if needed, including farmers, including the tourist sectors when it comes to disturbance in the forest. I think here in the mountain areas, disturbance can be quite high to deer populations. So the tourist sector is also really relevant. So to conclude my presentation, FACE believes that hunting is and will be key to ensure multifunctional, resilient, but also valuable forest ecosystems. We advocate for more biodiversity in forests without forgetting the economic side of forests, because in the end, the rural stakeholders, they need to live with the forest, but of course also from the forests. So we wish to create more dialogue, and now I'm very happy to discuss with you and finding best practice solutions. Thank you very much.
Please stay on. Please take a seat. Thank you, Sabrina, for your highly interesting keynote. This was a good impulse for the next panel discussion we're going to have with several experts. First, please join me on the stage, Tom Fox. Tom Fox is founder of Fox Forestry, sorry. You're gonna grow, you can sit there. Tom, you're too big to stay. And he's a US forest management and forest equipment provider. So next to me, please join Stig-Olof Holm. He's associate, an applause please, associate professor at the Department of Ecology and Environment Sciences at the Umeå University in Sweden. Nice to have you. So next, Florian Noll. Please come up to the stage. Leader service of the Bayerische Staatsforste from Germany, Bavaria. And last but not least, of course, you know him all, Uwe Seyer. Today he has restricted talking time. He's manager of FSC Germany, as you all already know. That's why I have you here. No, it's okay. Good job. Good job. We want to start with Professor Stig-Olof because he wanted to add something to the discussion we had in the morning about CO2 storage of forests, and you have something important for us.
First, I will thank you for the invitation to this interesting conference that had arranged this. What I want to add to the discussion is that we had to consider the time factor much more, because we have just 30 years until 2050, when we should had decreased the emissions of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere to net zero. And if we look at, for example, the cycle for forest in northern Sweden, it could be 80 to 100 years. So if you cut a tree and just take out a little part of it for saw material, it's about 15% or so, and the rest is polluted to the atmosphere. It will take until the year 2100 to get it back, and it's about 50 years too late. So it doesn't help that we regenerate in the long run. And if we don't, we have to sort of say decrease the logging, but also more of selective logging, because then this decrease in growth will be less among the larger trees. The canopies will close together much faster than if we have a clear cut and start to regenerate with small plants. They will grow up in time. So it's not about to decrease the logging, but also use more of selective logging for this purpose. So that was the only thing I had to add.
No, that's not the only thing. That's we have to keep this in mind because of climate change. Maybe this will be a broader discussion in the future, that we have to decrease. That's bad news for the industry. We have to decrease logging. So that's his statement. So we have to take it serious. Whatever happens in the future. Thank you very much. So, but now to the topic of reforestation and deer management. First, Sabrina, I want to come back to your presentation. So to sum it up, it's simply we have too much deers in Europe or also in North America. Is this the point?
Well, I tried to explain with my presentation that overabundance is really then occurring when it impacts objectives of forestry, but also, of course, human livelihoods directly by looking at vehicle collisions, for example, that are caused by increasing deer. But in the end, there is a huge complexity when it comes to the damage by deer caused in a forest, because in fact only a very low amount of deer can cause damage in the forest if there is no alternative browsing, if there's a lot of disturbance. So it's not only always the overabundance or the level of the deer species that is causing the damage, and we need to see it on a more holistic with a whole
I understand,
approach.
but you said in a natural system there wouldn't be as much deer as we have right now. So why don't we simply? It's a question to Florian Noll. Why don't we simply shoot more Bambis? The father of Bambi.
Well, why don't we simply shoot more?
I know no one takes this word in his mouth. No one is. You speak of managing deers, but at the end is shooting.
Very true, very true. Actually, we are bound by laws. We are bound by hunting laws, by forestry laws, which, for example, in Bavaria state that the natural regeneration has to grow up in the most part without any artificial means of protecting it. So for us, that means we have to be professional, we have to be purposeful in our hunting. But we are not the policymakers. Even as a state forest company, we are not the policymakers. We just follow the rules set out by governments, follow the rules by the state. And there's a maximum number of deer that we can harvest throughout the year, or within a period of 3 years for some species. And it's a slow process of getting those numbers up.
Is it so slow? To be precise, are you actually hunting what you are allowed to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We are. I can speak in for the state-managed lands. In probably 90%, we fulfill our quota to the last animal.
Okay. How is it in the U.S. or in Canada?
Well, we also do quite well with our quotas, but we also will manage male, female, and in per each area. So how many would be allowed to, if you want to control the population, then we would shoot more females and give more permits.
That's interesting. Off record, I heard that it's not so easy to manage population because the deers are quite intelligent and it's nowadays we have a forest which is denser than it was before. So it's easier in Austria. That's what I've heard. It's easier for them to hide, and it's not so easy to manage them.
Well, maybe I can answer to that.
Yes.
There was a big event, well, most of the Europeans will remember, about 35 years ago. It was a big storm called Wiebke. And, well, I guess all foresters pretty much realized that we can't go on with forest management the way we have been doing it up till then. So we started rebuilding stands, making them more resilient, resistant against storms, and we started underplanting, fill planting. We started working with multiple species, and therefore we increased the habitat quality quite significantly. And I think this is what Sabrina was bringing out in her presentation as well. The habitat quality all over Europe has gotten so much better in the last 30, 40 years, whether it's because of forest management, but also because of the availability of crops in the field and stuff. And so deer numbers have been skyrocketing. And for us as, well, managers, there might be a time lag before we catch up and we actually see the effects. Because it's, well, if I shoot a large number of deer every year, it takes about 5 to 10 years until I see an effect.
Really?
Well, if I rely on natural regeneration, for example, that has to develop. I have to find something on the ground first. If it's planting, I can see the effect quite rapidly. Because I mean, well, if I have no browse on my planted stands, then, well, I must have done something right. Whether it's reducing the number of deer or pushing them into other areas, I guess that's what. That might be the other effect.
Yeah. We will also have, create deer wintering areas. So we would, especially in Maine, we would preserve certain areas in the winter to kind of consolidate them.
Okay, we want to learn more about the different measures and you have in different countries. What's about liability? Who is liable when there's this deer browsing? What is the situation in Sweden, for example, Stig-Olof?
Well, in Sweden we have, it's a long country, so it's different conditions, of course, in the south, and we have many deer species there, red deer and roe deers, and not only the moose. In the north, it's almost only the moose, and we have also other winter conditions. So it's if we should have some, quick fix, it could be difficult, but what I suggest would be the best is that we will start to discuss some rules about regeneration of forests, because before lunch we're talking about to get the forest more climate resilience with mixed of species. But I think that much of the solution with this increase of browsing and so on, it would be also to put some rules that when you regenerate the forest, depending on site condition, of course you can't have mixed forest everywhere, but in those sites when you can regenerate, and it's each other spruce, each other pine and so on, and have larger space between the plants and allow natural regeneration of deciduous trees, and not then clean it out down to 10% according to the FSC rules in Sweden. If we could do it in that way in praxis, I think we could also solve some of the problems with that. What can the moose eat when we have cleaned off all the deciduous trees? Just the pine is left. So that's the situation, actually. So
I can contribute to that a little bit with what's happening in the U.S. And we started this at the end of the discussion just before lunch with the policy. So we have federal policy, but then also state policy, and to look at also deer populations, New York State, and how they manage private land, a lot of private landowners in the U.S. And so they would have, in New York, they would set, if you want to enter into their tax exemption program, you would have to manage according, they actually will tell you how much density you can harvest in each diameter class. So you have to have a forest stratification. So you're managing in all diameter classes up to the bigger trees.
So deer browsing is also due to mismanagement of forests. That's what I hear.
I would.
It's a technique.
No, yeah, it's
I find
You
it
have
funny.
less seedlings, less seedlings can get eaten.
I would go back to your first question, liability, responsibility. And I mean, I'm coming from Germany. Germany is a bit maybe different than other countries, but I think it's always worth to look into the concrete legislation of a country, because that would be my starting point. If you would ask me reliability, responsibility, I would always say, also in context of the whole conference, it's the forest owner, whoever that is, private, state, whoever. And if the starting point is forest, then I would say, okay, what is needed for a resilient forest? And then you can plant, but better before planting, you should go for natural regeneration, because that is, for the moment, a more resilient idea in answering questions around biodiversity, climate change, whatever. Resilient forestry. Resilient is natural regeneration. Natural regeneration, what does that mean in regards to hunting? And then it starts with killing. You could say killing, I would say balance between a system out of balance. And the problem in Germany is that we have a legislation, a forest legislation, which is connected to the forest owner, and a hunting legislation, which is connected to deer management and to hunting licenses, you could say, but in Germany it's a bit different system. And the disconnect between those two, that causes the problem. What is then the solution? In Germany, I would say, I mean, if there is one thing to be done in German forests, on an ecological side or on a balance side, killing deer, raw deer, or hunting more. And what I hear is okay, we have fulfilled figures, but you can't count raw deer. So what would you do then in Germany? My recommendation, FSC's recommendation, build a fence 10 to 10 meter and see what happens. So starting with an evaluation, what is the situation somewhere on a concrete place? And if there is the same situation outside and inside that fence, you could say, okay, no need for extreme hunting. But if there is an imbalance, if you see trees growing, native trees growing in the fence and outside there's nothing, then this is a clear indication, okay, you have to hunt, you have to work on that, regardless whether you have fulfilled some figures of deer populations that you anyway can't count. So this is our concept of approaching the problem.
Okay, it comes more from the owner,
completely from the natural forest perspective.
And we need more data, more precise data, better information.
But it starts always from the forest perspective and never from the deer perspective.
Okay, Florian has to.
Well, I support that 100%. Fulfilling numbers does not solve the problem, but one has to take into consideration where these numbers come from. And I was saying beforehand that, well, we don't make the rules, we just follow the rules. But, for example, in Bavaria, what are the numbers actually based upon? That's the question. And there's a vegetation sampling done every 3 years, and out of the results of that vegetation sampling, we come up together with the government, we as the hunters, landowners, land managers, we come up with the numbers for the next 3-year period. So there is actually some evidence, or there is some evidence there that relies to what you were saying. It's not a fence, no, it's tracts, and we use those. Because, well, of course, we won't have a landscape, or we don't, I guess nobody wants a landscape without any deer. We just want them regulated enough so our main mandate, which is the resilient and resistant forest, can grow.
Okay. Sabrina, a simple question. What is the goal? Which figure do we want to have? How many deers do we want to have in Europe? Or is it depending on each country? But how many deers are good and how many are bad?
Yes, I think this is really member states. It depends from member state to member state, but also from region to region. And this is why we advocate so much on the level of the European Commission to leave this deer management and the forest management up to the member states, because you cannot set rules or clear numbers on a European level. This is not possible. We need to respect the diversity of Europe's legislation, which is a big point on who is responsible for the damage. In the European Commission, they always talk about game balance. We don't like this word game, because it implies that the hunting community is responsible, because first of all, not every game species is causing damage. And sometimes you have ungulates, like in Poland you have the moose, which is strictly protected, or there's no open hunting season, which is causing damage. But it's not under the responsibility of the hunters, because it's strictly protected. So we want to talk about ungulate management, and we really advocate for not clear definitions, not clear regulations from the side of the European Commission.
Stig Uluf, how many deers or gooses need Sweden?
I would say that, of course, it depends on which part of Sweden we're talking about. In the north, for example, we have still a lot of, the hunters gathering a lot of food for the households and the countryside people there. So it's important also as an ecological meat, so to say, for the local population. And the forest companies, they just want to shoot them down. So it's a conflict going on there between also private forest owners that want to have more of moose, because they're partly dependent on it. And a lot of people have moved from northern Sweden before, but they come back and to the hunting season, and it's socially important also this. So I think that in many places in the north we have too few of moose. While in other parts it could be, if you combine many deers, for example in southern Sweden, it has an apparent effect on the vegetation and on so. And of course we shouldn't have as many as we had in the 1980s, when it became a lot of traffic accidents and so on.
Okay.
We cannot have that level. But I would say that if you put an average in northern Sweden, maybe 6-7 moose per square kilometer in the winter population. Okay. I mean, in the area of where I live in Västerbotten County, in many places in the coast there, it's down to 3.3 moose in winter population per 1,000 hectares. So they have shut it down. And it depends on that it's owned by forestry companies, while in the southern part of the county and the northern part we have about 9 to 10. It's too much, because the decision is taken by smaller forest owners. Mm-hmm. So it's not have so much to do with ecological reasons or browsing intensity. It's much up to who owns the land.
Okay.
And what they want to do. So the authorities have taken a hand from it. I mean, 10 years ago when we shifted these rules, before that it was the county council, so to say. It was politicians that took the decisions, but now it's put down to the companies, the forest owners.
Okay. Tom?
I would say that in Maine we also have the moose population. This is also starting to change. The moose population is moving further north. We've got heavy tick problems with the ticks getting on the moose.
It's a problem for the moose?
It's a problem for the moose. Too many ticks. It's too warm. It's
such
warming
a big
up.
Animal.
Okay, it's warming up, and then the ticks are on the moose. We have wildlife management districts, so we're not you know how you have the rights to walk through everybody's property, and every citizen has the right for a hunting license. Okay, in Maine it's 10 years old. You can shoot big game, so we send our children to camps to get their hunting license. You know, and this is part of our culture. Okay, but the wildlife biologists for the state are the ones that are choosing the numbers. They have the dial on the population, okay? And each wildlife management district would have different quotas. So for example, the farmers are in northern Maine where we have big broccoli fields, potatoes, and a huge moose population. This is where you're allowed to shoot more moose. And this is where we have hunters going to where the problem is, where the populations are highest density. Give out more permits, go there. It's not a privatized decision.
I just have, maybe it's a silly question for all of you, but it's a system. It's a system. It's a forest. In this system, what's the role of a deer, of a moose? What's his role? Or is a forest without such animals thinkable and will grow and have a better time than before? What's the role? In biology, everything has a role.
Yeah, but I'm not sure whether this is the right question. Sorry for that, but I would say.
Okay, thank you. It was silly.
No, it was not silly.
Although you can't answer it.
I like naive questions, but my naive answer on this kind of thinking is what I mean. I disagree with Sabrina in a way that is it appropriate to say no? There is too many European regulations. We are not able. We should not put out policies in that regards. I disagree with that. What would it be? And this is a naive point from my side. Then saying simply, the starting point, the naive starting point, is a healthy forest. You could say a resilient forest, a climate stable forest, whatever. If that would be an agreed principle, then I would say, then it's not a difficult task to say, okay, we need to hunt as long as the balance is there. If there is a balance, it's impossible to extinct raw deer in Middle Europe. It's impossible. Maybe. And therefore, what is the right balance? And then I hear figures, counting figures. I mean, for me, it's annoying because at the end, it's not a question about. It's the starting point is a healthy forest. Yeah. If this is not an agreeable concept, then we can go home here.
You know, my question was naive, but it wasn't stupid. Because I just want to say, because we are living all in an age of extinction. What we are doing worldwide, we are extinct. We are living in the 5th extinction we had in the history of this planet, and that's due to mankind, due to agriculture and deforestation and this stuff. So and if I say to people on the street, hey, we are living in an age of distinction. Okay, there is an insect in this jungle. Do I need it? No. I need cows to eat and and sheep. I like the wool. That's okay. But the other animals. So the question isn't so. It's not so naive. No, why do we want to live with the deers?
But we're living not in a situation of having an old growth forest overall. We have farming. We have urbanization.
And we want them.
And it's impossible to extinct raw deer. It's impossible.
I'm not sure. Maybe.
I think there has been scientific tests. It's not possible. I mean, you try to extinct, and then you finally on islands there has been scientific approaches. At the end, they find out it's possible. I mean, you always estimate now it's done, and then you have another 100 that you find if you go.
But I saw Ireland, who is pretty empty.
Yeah, but anyway, the problem is with these figures. I mean, if you start with figures, okay, now I have done my job with figures. Then you can be sure that there's still raw deer in the forest. The starting point is is the raw deer damaging natural processes that are urgently needed to create resilient forests. And also when you see the big
geographical decision making, okay, where you have different situations throughout the EU, we have different situations throughout the United States. And each state and each wildlife management zone district is in charge of their own decision making.
But would you disagree with my suggested concept, saying the starting point is a as much possible resilient forestry, including natural regeneration?
Yeah, you can do that, but you need to do that in a way that you have flexibility for that region.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sabrina
can I,
wanted to
answer on your comment.
answer.
FACE does not want no regulations at all at EU level, but at the moment the European Commission is trying to explain this complexity of ungulate forest balance within one of the guidelines, and this paragraph is less than half a page long. So they oversimplify the situation. They do not take into consideration the diversity of European forests. And yes, we want light frameworks. We want that there is a good balance between deer and forest, and that there should be a better integration of deer management into the forest management plans, but in such a way that leads to flexibility in member states. So yes, it is very important. It is important to have regulations and a good framework, but from Brussels you cannot, because they tend to restrict. They tend to put numbers on certain deers. They want to define the responsibility of who's the responsibility for the ungulate damage within a guideline. But you cannot do it because the legislation in Europe is so different. So we do advocate for a good framework that respects the regional differences.
Okay, okay. I have a question from a gentleman here in the back row. Wait. Here's the microphone. Could you please say? Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I introduce myself. I'm Serge, coming from France. Just a question. I'm very surprised. Nobody speak about predators, the wolf, for example.
Yeah.
You don't speak about? We have no in your
Oh, it's a
country?
big topic. Yeah.
It's a big
But we didn't. We can do. Yeah.
It's a big topic.
You open a big discussion.
Yes.
I wanted to avoid it, but it's a really big issue also in Austria right now. Okay, Sabrina.
And naturally, I need to answer that because, of course, large carnivores is one of the main topics also for FACE. We see, and I think science supports us, that large carnivores, especially in Central Europe, where our landscapes are so intensified, so productive, where the winters are so mild, that large carnivores would not have a big impact. When you look at Germany, even 10,000 of wolves would not have the possibility to regulate our deer. It is more, large carnivores have more impact if the climate is harsher, if the surrounding areas are less productive. Of course, large carnivores, they change behavior, and that influence also the hunting and the management. But I think it is, naive to think that the large carnivores will be the solutions to the problem of
as long as the deers are nicht langsamer, schneller, are faster than the sheeps, because that's the problem. The farmers, they lose a lot of sheep. Okay, that's not a solution. The wolf.
I think it will not solve any increased deer populations, especially in Central Europe, in Germany.
Thank you for this good question. So the French did arrive. That's good, because yesterday you didn't manage it. Next time you know where we are. Okay? You'll find us. It's not only Paris. Yeah.
I can add something to that. If we have a larger productivity in the landscape, as you mentioned, then we will have more of herbivores, and we have also a possibility to the conflict between two-legged and four-legged hunters would decrease. So, for example, in Sweden, if we should allow more of thick regrowth of young forest and so on, and more deciduous trees and so on, we have more fodder for moose and for deer and so on, and then it could allow little more wolves in the top, so to say, of this pyramid. So then it could be a practical way also to solve a little bit of the conflict about the moose, who should eat it, wolves or humans.
Okay, we now had a long discussion about the deer population and the moose and whatever. Very interesting. But now I want to talk about what are the measures we take against deer browsing. What are we doing in each country? What are we doing in in the US or in Canada. This year, it's Trico.
Yeah.
It's starting.
We're starting.
That's why we're meeting here. To be honest,
Yes, absolutely.
we need you.
And
But
we're in a unique position in the Northeast and in Maine in particular. We've got a forest management company. We actually can come and listen and learn from these different discussions, and then I can come home and go right in the field and implement. So I'm writing. In Maine we have a lot of forest landowners. We have it's about 5% smaller than Austria, the state of Maine. So we're very close in size. Mm. With the exception is the amount of small landowners is huge. We have 86,000 individual landowners at 10 acres and less.
We have 200,000. Okay.
Yeah. So we are now involved with feet on the ground, writing these management plans and then implementing them.
Okay, and until now, how did you manage?
Until now, we were managing with both hunting and tubes. We've got a lot of tubes for planting.
Okay. These plastic tubes?
Yeah, and it's expensive and not a real long-term solution at a larger scale.
And you have a lot of plastic in the wood, in the forest.
Yeah, we're working on projects much like what we discussed this morning. In addition, we also have some genetically modified, chestnuts, American chestnuts, bringing them up. We're taking small clear cuts and then introducing migrating species.
Okay. What are the measures taken in Bavaria?
Well, we try to focus on professional hunting management. Some of the measures have been talked about. Interval hunting, we try to take that seriously. Like when I talk about hunting here, I'm talking about roe deer and wild boar. Red deer and chamois is a different question. There's different measures there, but we try to focus on communal hunts involving the public. So in the fall, for example, or we start in the summer with communal hunts. Lots of hunters get together. The animals are not moved, and then once the fall progresses, we go into the driven hunts. So sometimes up to 100 people. So you have the disturbance on the site for a very short period of time, and you harvest a lot of animals. And if you're effective in that, you can, well, first of all, reduce the pressure and harvest a large number of animals in one day.
And beside hunting, what are you doing?
Well, if that fails, then we have to rely on Trico. Well, yeah.
Do we have it on tape?
No, actually, we looked it up, and I was quite surprised by the numbers myself. I mean, it's the application that makes it.
When you set quotas, it's a little bit different, the structure. I mean, in the U.S., the people own the game. It's the animals and the hunting is the public, and then we can have permission to go hunt on the private forest lands, and then all of our quotas are set by the biologists. So it's very geographically driven, right? How does that work here?
Well, in Germany, wildlife does not have an owner. Wild ist herrenlos. That's the German definition. So if you have the right to hunt in this area, then you own the animal after you have killed it. Then it's yours. But until then, no one owns the animals. So the quotas are set, as I said, we have a vegetation sampling that's for Bavaria now, just one state regulation. Vegetation sampling every 3 years, conducted by the Ministry of Forests. They run transects through every hunting area in the states. Over 1,500, 2,000 So they do a browsing assessment, and on that browsing assessment, they conclude, okay, the numbers have been so and so many deer harvested, and the browse shows that it's still too high, like 3%, 4% is acceptable, everything above that, not acceptable. So you up the numbers.
But there's a difference to the system in the US.
Exactly.
As you said, you have a licensing system. You can buy a license for hunting. In Germany, if you own forests bigger than 75 hectares, you own the right on that area to hunt. And for community-owned forest, for example, you can sell it. You can rent it to someone. And that is a
huge difference.
It's a huge difference because there is not enough, from our perspective, there's not enough incentives to do. I mean, if there is a competition, if one if you go for hunting and if you're licensed for hunting and someone else has the same license, there's an incentive to be the first one. Otherwise,
what are you doing with your harvest reports? You have so many deer in a certain area, you harvest so many in a certain area. How does that sort of extrapolate through the years?
The harvesting reports we file, or every hunting area owner or manager files those, sends them to usually to the municipal or the county government. They compile them up, and then we have a compilation for the state, and the numbers are.
And does that coincide with the browsing data?
Well, the browsing data, of course, yes.
Yeah. This is where you.
That's basically where it comes together. I mean, after 3 years, we draw the line and say, okay, there's so and so many deer are harvested, broken down to the individual hunting area.
May I interrupt for a moment? But we have a question from our Swedish friend.
Yeah, it's starting to heat up, so maybe I should put some more firewood on.
Yes, please do it. We like it juicy.
From a practical point of view, I do an oak plantation. We also have a quota system in Sweden. And when the moose gets there, the quota is filled. And I can apply to the state, and 3 months later they give me the answer, yeah, maybe you can shoot that moose. It's not there then.
It's too late.
Yeah, it's too late. So, I mean, it doesn't work with
but when he comes back,
regulation systems. You need to do it when it's there. That's one part. I also experience, and this is for Sabrina, that there is an increase in people that say we shouldn't hunt at all. It's wrong to kill animals. And I think they are getting stronger and stronger in the European Union. So I would say we're getting a bigger and bigger problem doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can maybe answer on it. I think it's not the amount of people, it's how loud they are, and that's the problem. Because if you survey the whole population of Sweden, hunting is very much accepted. Also, our Dutch member did a survey via the whole population, and surprisingly, it doesn't fit with what the loud people, especially on social media, say, that hunting is not accepted. Hunting is a bad way to manage nature. If you look at the broader society, the hunting is surprisingly rather accepted.
Should he work more on social media?
Yes, we do that. We now have a specialized person on it because it's so important. It's a battlefield out there, and so we need to battle with fake news. Social media gets more and more important.
So, by the way, this discussion is open for all of you. Any more questions in the audience? Okay. The lady in the back row.
Well, about Light in the Fire. I'm Elena Martinez. I'm a member of End Ecocide Sweden. And I think you didn't get an answer to your very good question about the mass extinction of species in the world. Of course, if you see a forest as a production unity, you don't need the moose or other animals eating it. But you have to understand that a forest is an ecosystem. And what do we have? Why are we needing moose or deer or other animals? of course, they are very tasty to eat, and it's a very good quality meat. And according to the IPCC, is a very good source of meat. But other people could say that they have the right to exist because this is their world too. We people, we are expanding ourselves all over the world, destructing nature, but it's coming back to us. It's a part, this crisis of climate change and loss of biodiversity is going to shake us too, because we are just one species in this world, and we need all the others to have a functioning planet. So it's not that we can decide, oh, we can afford 5 moose and 3 animals. I'm not against hunting. I think it's a very old and fine way of getting food. But we have to rethink how we see in life other species in this world, because we need them in ways we not even understand.
For me, it's poor provocation. Sorry.
No, it's no provocation. I think we have to take this serious, because maybe you don't realize it, but we are right now in a shift of the minds. We recognize that we only are parts of the system, part of the not even the crown. We are simply an important part, but we are part of the system, and we can't easily get rid of all the other parts and think it won't affect us. It will affect us, and the pandemic has showed us that it is already affecting us. So what do you say, Stig-Olof?
Yes, and I will just add to this that if we have come to very close to a kind of parenthesis. It's not only about the climate, it's also about that we have limited resources of agricultural land left and so on. If you're looking at the global production of biofood, so to say, it's only about 10% left. We have taken what is possible to take, and if we look at the weight of human-produced things like cities and roads and so on, 2 years ago that weight become larger than the weight of the biomass in the world. And if we look at birds and mammals, about 5% is wild mammals like deer and elephants and whales and such things. 36% is the weight of humans, and 59% is the weight of our domesticated animals, pigs, chicks, and so on. So we have gone very far. Most people doesn't know this. We're in the end, so to say.
You say?
I think you bring up a good point, and I'm excited to try to watch some of our trials here, and this kind of leads us right into TRICO. What we have set up in some of our research forests is we've done a commercial harvest 2 years ago. Then we are working with deer fencing. Then outside the deer fencing, we have red oak plantation, and then we've treated them with TRICO. So we want to also watch here how can we work with the wildlife to help us. We protect the desired species with the TRICO. We let the browse on the other plant material around our desired species, while at the same time we're looking at the forest growing in this wild state. What is going to happen to this understory, and how does the growth of that understory affect the desired tree species? So this is a tool that we have not had in the United States yet. That's effective. So I'm really excited to meet everybody and to be here and to kind of share this experience in real life.
Thank you, Tom. Uwe, you have 2 minutes.
Maybe one. There's no evidence that we are able to extinct raw deer, And it's easy to say, you can't say, let's extinct raw deer. Nobody would say that. But what would be the price to accept a too high density of raw deer? Raw deer population and the size of raw deer population in Middle Europe is a consequence of forestry, reducing the rotation period in regards to old growth forest, building roads in forest, all these kind of things that we need to do proper forestry to produce timber and other products through forest. So a higher population is a consequence of doing that. The price of having too high density of raw deer is unstable forestry ecosystems, not resilient forests, and all these kind of a disconnect and a moving forward of ecosystems in a direction that is, from my perspective as an ecologist, not acceptable. And again, there is no evidence that we would be able to kill all raw deer in Middle Europe. There's never ever a scientific fact that kind of underlines that. You're supporting me. I mean, it hurts. I'm not in favor of killing animals. I don't like it, but I think the price for not doing it is by far too high.
And as Sabrina said that in her presentation, maybe if we have too much of the deers, we have less of other species.
Yes.
Other species are suffering. Maybe is it like this? Is it so?
Well, high deer population, also high roe deer population, can have an impact on the whole ecosystem, as I said. So we need to find a good balance. But if you can solve one problem, like reducing the damage on trees, while at the same time having eco-friendly meat, which roe deer meat is, which is very locally produced, and especially in the times of COVID, we have seen that is an increased interest in game meat because it's locally produced, it's eco-friendly, and this is what people strive for nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Stig Olof, you were...
Yes, I would also want to add a little bit of the historical perspective to this discussion, because not long ago, people in many European countries were starving, for example, in Sweden, northern Sweden. And the populations of deer and moose, and the roe deer were almost becoming extinct. The moose didn't exist in northern Sweden. And all over Europe, it was hunted down because people were hunting to getting food for the children on the table. And then this oil came, and we could produce by oil and fertilizers from phosphorus and so food in an enormous scale. Mm-hmm. But what will happen in the future if we don't can this anymore? What will happen to the wildlife? Probably we will hunt them to have something to eat. I would just elongate the perspective on this.
That was an interesting perspective. I think Peter wanted to add something.
Yes, my duty is to say something at every session.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
in the club with Uwe.
Yeah, with Uwe. Yes,
that's good.
Special. No, another controversial perspective in all the issue about forests and wildlife is how we treat the deer in winter. That means feeding deer, and I would be interested in your perspectives, also especially of Face. What is your take on that? Because I mean, there are some that say you should not do that. That would lead to a regulation of the population automatically, because there is only the natural way of finding food in winter and would reduce the population. And the other, so maybe others have also an opinion on that. And the other thing is, I mean, you've been talking a lot about meat that you get for a living, but I mean that's only half of the truth. I mean the other truth is that it's about the antlers, and it's about trophies and trophy hunt. So there's a big incentive also for having a high population to doing that. So I would be interested in your take on these two aspects, and to have a little bit more diversity in the aspects on wildlife and forests.
We actively manage deer wintering yards in Maine, so we would have specific, usually softwood, cedar swamps would be a good one, and we actually regulate those and maintain them as such in size and and location. So
Okay.
that's what we're doing.
And first, I have a question to Florian. If we had a 2 or 3 years ago, we had a winter with a lot of snow in the south, and we had deers who were in snow till to their heads. So the question was, let them die or give them food? What would you do in this situation if you have a lot of snowfall and a bad winter? Would you feed them, or do you say, okay, this is nature?
Well, I can maybe comment on the thing. We will not feed roe deer, period. And historically driven, we do winter feed a red deer, of course, in the Alps, because I mean they were in the past migrating out of the mountains in the wintertime into the lower regions. So now there's agriculture, there's roads, there's cities, and so on. If we want to keep them in the forest and minimize the damage to the stands, then we have to come up with something. But, and here we go for your second question, there's feeding and there's feeding. I mean, we are feeding in order for the population to survive the wintertime, but we're not feeding in order to build up a population or to make the population grow bigger antlers, more ends, and so on. That's the main difference. And I totally agree. In the past, that system has been, well, perverted. People are feeding roe deer all year round, calling it baiting. People are feeding red deer from, well, the first snowfall until January 31st, end of hunting season. So you know the reasoning behind that. It's all about getting the animals presented to you on a silver platter. And that's not right. I mean, if you do a proper red deer management, you feed them throughout the winter in order to let them survive, but nothing else.
Is this a difference between Austria and Germany and Bavaria?
Well, I guess
you can speak
according to the law, there probably isn't. But how it's done, there might be. But I mean, I can only speak for the state-owned forests in Bavaria. Private hunting areas might be quite different. And I mean, every year we get the pictures of big mountains of food being brought out to support the animals. So, yeah.
Sabrina?
Yes, to answer your question, for me it's quite easy because FACE doesn't have a position.
There you go.
Luckily. No, because, as I tried to explain before, deer management or ungulate management was just member state competence. So for FACE at European level, we didn't have to deal with it. This is our members, and our members deal with it themselves. So we don't have a position on winter feeding.
I would more connect to the second part with this trophy thing. I think this is something that we need to urgently overcome. I mean, the cultural setting that I'm coming again from natural forest management and natural dynamics, resilient forestry systems and things like that. How can we accept as a society that hunting is done based on trophies? I mean, for me, it's something that we urgently need to culturally overcome. And also the disconnect between the different laws that is connected. Hunting law connected to this kind of thing, and then the forest law that is more back up through forest management perspectives.
This is where our hunting quotas are mandated by the biologists. So to play into this, it's illegal for us to feed.
Okay, it's illegal.
Illegal.
Okay. But on the feeding is also an interesting. If there is a need, I mean, nobody would like to answer better kill or let them die. This is also impossible to answer from an emotional perspective. But if there is a need in repeatedly extreme winter periods to feed, that, I mean, what kind of indication do you need that you have an overpopulation? For me, it's a clear indication there is an overpopulation because the density of I'm talking only about raw deer at the moment, there is an overpopulation and someone has not done its job properly. my perspective
The
as
change,
an
no, the
ecologist.
variability from winter to winter is so high, you can imagine, really.
Yeah, but
And I can show you charts.
but ecology is not an annual thing.
Yeah, you can have an extremely warm winter with rain and an extremely cold with.
Yeah, welcome in the Darwin Club. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
For me,
No.
it's an indication of a by far too high population, and then the consequence is not in this particular winter to let them die or to feed them, but it's
And they
more
won't
the conceptual question: what is your management perspective and your monitoring and your perspective on an appropriate deer population in an area where you have occasionally these kind of winter situations?
We have a response also to this topic, also from Johannes Kwitzter, who, as a lot of people here, is a hunter.
Yes, and I think we spoke in these 2 days about good and bad forestry management, and right now we also spoke about bad hunting management, but there's also good hunting management. With regards to preservation, and of course, black sheep are everywhere in forestry as well as in hunting. But there are also lots of hunters who take their either their job or their kind of hobby or free time. They're spending quite seriously in order to preserve and in order to find the right balance for their respective hunting area they care for. And when it comes to differences, what I think to know is that there is quite a big difference between the culture of hunting in continental Europe and in Scandinavia, for example, where this the question about the meat hunting and the trophy hunting is quite diverse all over Europe, and maybe you could also go.
Yeah, I will say that in southern Sweden it could be that some landowners get a lot of money from the trophy hunting, but it's very rare. In the north or main of Sweden, I would say that it's more for meat or for traditions and so on. But the number of trophies, for example, from moose has decreased a lot. The big antlers has gone because since the forest company put the pressure on to shoot down the moose population, then by chance, of course, less and less of old moose survive to come up to that age when they produce large antlers. So it has just declined.
And maybe we have in Central Europe the same development, so that this kind of trophy thinking is more our generation, and the new generation is not looking for, like, doesn't need a big car.
Well, actually, that trophy thinking was, there was a movie, I think, about 40 years ago. It was about red deer. It was done by a German journalist, and I remember the opening statement from that movie, and it said, the question of the time is not to protect red deer. The question of the time is to shoot them. And that was a big uproar, of course, because well, until that time we have been building up populations and thought that it was proper management. And that was the first time when actually the effects of damaged forests by red deer, I'm talking red deer now, came to light. And I think since then, at least in forestry circles, there has been a shift in thinking, but I cannot speak for all Forest Service hunters, and I cannot speak for all private hunters. Some people might go out for trophy hunting, and some people might go out because, well, they like to be in nature, and some people do it because it's their job. And what Johannes was saying, there's also with the private hunting community, there's a lot of people who actually manage their areas quite nicely and quite well. We should not forget that. But as we all know, once you actually manage a hunting area, it becomes hard work, and the line between a hobby and a job is quite blurry. And especially if you take into consideration what we have all been talking about, state of the regeneration, health of the forest, and so on, then we cannot talk about a hobby anymore. It becomes a job, and it becomes a 24/7 job, because you're basically doing nothing but hunting. And preparing the hunt, and butchering afterwards, and chasing animals with the dogs that are wounded afterwards. So it becomes a really tough job.
At this point, I would like to close this. No,
I would like to add for the trophy hunting and for this discussion.
Tom, you're allowed to do everything.
Where we also differ here is in, at least for the moose in Maine, we're also in charge of the ratios. So if we're trying to control the population, we're gonna give permits for females and less permits for the trophy. Okay, and then we also will have a lottery system, and we'll also not shy for auctioning these off. If you want to buy a permit and shoot a moose in Maine, it's possible, but you have to pay us, you know. So anybody wants to come to Maine moose hunting, I fix you it up for you.
Okay. Anna?
What we can see is that more young people hunt, and there are also more and more women that hunt in Sweden, and everything is not so black and white, because you can hunt for traditional reasons and for getting meat and from maintaining the wildlife at the same time. And then you go out and you sit in a traditional way in the forest, and then all of a sudden it's a huge crown, and then you make a trophy out of it, but that was not your intention, but since it's so beautiful, you do it, or the baits of the wild boar. So I think it's can be a mixture of things too, not either or.
Okay, that's was interesting. Maybe are there any more questions here from the back?
Yeah, I just want to sprinkle some oil in the fire. I can relate to what Florian just said with the 24/7 job. I used to be a gamekeeper, a stalker at private estates. So if we talk about rejuvenating forests and hunting and putting up pressure in these areas so that this forest can come up, this is a really, really tough job that most let's do it, part-time hunters are not up to. The next thing is carnivores do have an impact. That's at least my experience, and I've been out in the forest quite a lot, especially on roe deer. Lynx has decreased populations in several areas that I've been working.
Okay.
Not as much on red deer, for sure. But fallow deer, roe deer is highly affected of lynx. And hunting makes it much more difficult, especially in these dense areas where they can hide. So putting up pressure in these areas for someone who sits like 2 evenings or 2 mornings per week will not fulfill the job.
Well, that's the time when you hunt those areas. Whether it's lynx or, well, some areas where wolves are pretty, well, there is high numbers of wolves. You're pretty much doomed when you do single hunting by yourself. I mean, that actually ties in with what I said earlier. We have to rely more on these communal hunts, on driven hunts, and make those more effective. That's at least our experience.
Okay. An impression from Switzerland?
Exactly, and just to confirm what was said before, in Switzerland, I mean, there are not so many wolves, but in areas where there is a pack of wolves, you see an impact in the forest. And maybe not even because the number of deers goes down so much, but they are more cautious, they move around more quickly. So this may have an impact already. So I think we shouldn't rule out the large predators.
And the impact in which direction? In which way is the impact?
So that there was less damage on young trees.
Oh, less browsing.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, more wolves.
More links. This is what I
Links.
heard.
Thank you. This was
I
very
think,
nice.
may I contribute to what you said? I think that would be a forward-looking debate whether it's appropriate as a society to accept hobby hunting versus kind of having the responsibility to discuss publicly kind of new concepts, professional hunters, whatever kind of thing, because it's a 24/7 job.
It is.
And if we seriously look forward for more resilient forests, we need to be open-minded for this debate, because it has somehow limits where we are at the moment and how we are behaving, or have the agreed concept is at its limits, I would say. Therefore, I fully support what you said.
A last one.
At the same time, though, we need private hunters in order to, fill our ranks in the communal hunts.
I agree with that, but we need to have this discussion a bit more public.
Yes.
Maybe. Okay, if you can, it's a good thing if you can agree. This is a very interesting discussion. We will proceed outside. Now, last question to sum up a little bit what we are talking about at each of the panelists. What is your call for action if you think of deers and reforestation and deer management? Let's start with Uwe.
I mean, I said it's hunting, but maybe if I reconsider...
Yeah, think about what the others are telling you.
I think it's more keeping our focus on resilient forestry in regards to climate change. And in Germany, that would mean, beside hunting as much as possible, raw deer, it would be maybe kind of opening up for a forward-looking debate between to solve the contradiction between forest law and hunting law.
Okay. Florian, what's your
call for action? If we're talking hunting, we should seriously use all the possibilities given to us by law. We should invest into new hunting technologies. We should invest into new hunting techniques. For example, climbing tree stands for us has been a success story in driven hunts, but that's something that's fairly new, but we have to keep an open mind and adapt to that.
Okay. Stig Olof?
Yes, once again, I think the most important thing is that we start at least to discuss some kind of rules or legislations about how to regenerate forests, because we have of course, in many places in Europe, also in Sweden, mixed forest coming allowed to come after the cutting. But in many places, it's just a few percent deciduous trees left, especially in northern Sweden. And this conifer monocultures, we have to stop with this because it has such a dramatic effect on many ecological services, climate resilience, the possibility to have a medium large moose production and so on. So this is my main message, that start to discuss some rules for regeneration of already clear cut areas. Then we'll solve many problems once.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I'd kind of go along with this. I think having I also like the ability to leave each geographical area to their own specific targets. However, having more stratification in the forest, more diameter classes, more diversity in stand structure, I think is very important. And I think that we can do this we can do this and maintain the monetary values along with the biodiversity values, and somehow there's that ability to naturally regenerate and still manage these stands. Going back to the first speaker too, I can relate to this along the coast of Maine, managing a lot of coastal properties and having vibrant, strong, stable stands, and quantifying the value of these shoreland and riparian zones. But at the end of the day, having multiple variations of species and size of retention trees.
Okay, that's cool. Sabrina.
Yes, I think a lot of good things already have been said, but for us it's mainly the integration of wildlife management into the forest management plans, open dialogue, but also forward thinking. If you reforest areas, think already ahead how we can support the hunting community to have a good impact on the deer populations. And I'm thinking about hunting corridors or facilitating hunting opportunities, but also looking at the biodiversity of forest ecosystems, creating resting zones, creating alternative grazing and browsing areas. So I think, yes, if we find good cooperation, if there's good dialogue and regular dialogue to analyze the damage, and we can create climate resilient and future fit forests.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Dear audience, please a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much for being here. You can. I just need a minute more. You can sit down. We have now. We'll have our coffee break for 10 minutes, and at 3:15, we start with our next inspirational journey. We have 3 stands. The first one is an introduction to TRICO, hosted by Gary Jobling and Alicia Wurr from Quidsta Agro. Then we have another results of American academic studies about TRICO, hosted by Julia Hengel from Quidsta Agrobiological Development. And we have TRICO and the inspirational journey to restore the American chestnut tree to its native range, hosted by Brian Roth. You know him from Roth Forestry Research. And of course, you can meet our panelists in person. So have a nice time. We see you later. See you in about an hour. See you. Goodbye.